Okay, friends, welcome. Gonna make this fast. Just letting you know the markets are looking treacherously, dangerously on edge. Doesn't mean they have to break down, but oh, they could so easily break down. We're gonna go over it. Let's do it. Okay, friends, we're gonna try to make this pretty fast and quick. We have S&P 500. For it to flip bullish, again, it would have to get up here, way up here, 7,050. Just to ease off the pressure that it's in, price has to get above the EMA. So we need price action up here in the 6,900 range. We are not there. We are down here. We are down here. This line right here, this 6,750, 6,800 starts getting weak and delicate. You could get a bounce. You could get a bounce up this line, but unless the price bounces and gets above this EMA, it's still going to be trending down. When these two lines cross, a lot of the algorithms are going to read that as a flip to a bearish trend, and they are not going to like that, and those algorithms are probably going to sell off. So you might get a lucky bounce here, but if this breaks, you're going to get a speed crash down to 6,500. We'll see what happens after that. Nasdaq's been looking kind of weaker than S&P 500 for a while. It flipped bearish back here on the EMA. Again, you'd have to get way up here, 25,900, just to flip bullish again and kind of ease off this pressure. You'd have to get above the the previous highs. We are super close to a breakdown point. You could think of the breakdown point as kind of anywhere in this gray area. You could think of it as low as 20. Look at this. It could be as low as 23,800. I think 24,000 is a good psychological level, where below 24,000, people are just not going to like it, and they're going to break down. Look at this diagonal pattern. It tried to break above. It couldn't. It's been sliding down the top of this thing. You had a diagonal support line running here. Obviously, the diagonal support lines are not as trustworthy, but nevertheless, broke through. If it breaks through down here, it kills off both the horizontal support and this diagonal breakdown. This diagonal support, that would be very negative. Dow Jones Industrial Average, it got attention when it passed 50,000, but I still considered that kind of a negative thing. I believe people rushed into Dow Jones thinking that there were safety stocks in there. This was a gravestone doji candle, which indicated a possible downtrend. That turned out to be true. This line right here has probably turned into resistance. So even if it comes up, probably going to get rejected at around this 49,600 range. This candle looks unusual to me. I'm not a candle master, but you could see that as like a reversal candle where if the market and the world are semi-stable, then you might get a bounce up here, but it probably still gets rejected under here. So just keep your eye on it. The reason why I'm not confident on that is because this line alone is probably a support line. Look, candle stops there, candle stops there. So if it doesn't blast up and it just comes under this blue line anyways, it's going to continue coming down. It would quickly come down back down to this 47,000 range. All right, we'll try to move on quick. NVIDIA. I still see this giant head and shoulders pattern. This blast up is just another shoulder, so this is really just one formation. Had price last week, price was up here, which was fantastic, but the very next day it couldn't hold it. It dropped down. I'm having a hard time figuring out whether this pattern is on a diagonal. It kind of was on a diagonal, and now these supports are going horizontal. So it could be that coming under this red line is the break around 175, or it might be coming under 174, 171 would be the break. So it might take a little while to get down here. Below 171, it gets bad. If you wanted to play it safe, you could even consider this as your low point, this 164. Okay, so By then, once you get down to 160, if it goes below 160, we're dropping. We're dropping on that. Google looked so good when a lot of the other AI stuff and technology stuff was faltering, but it really just put in a giant head and shoulders pattern. As you can see, we are very close to a breakdown on that. Below 296, I would consider that broken. You might get a little chop in here, but the support, the price target, if that's confirms, would be down here at 251 and 245, somewhere in that range. Once again, Apple. Here's Apple. This was clearly a peak. This drawdown probably surprised a lot of people. It did blast up, but not enough. It came up about 66% or something like that. Faltered. Again, tried to recover, couldn't get as high as before. This is just working its way out and most likely comes down. If it comes below 255, it's just going to drop. It's most likely going to drop down here to 245. And let's see. I think if this whole structure breaks down, you wind up with a target down here around 202, 206. Tesla, super popular tech stock for so many people, but as we've been discussing for a long time, yes, it can still break down. I mean, if the whole market breaks down, then it can break down. And as one of the most highly valued companies, it probably has more to fall than quite a lot of other companies that might have been ignored. So very close to confirming a head and shoulders. Actually, to be honest with you, I'm not sure 100%. I don't like it when there's a big left shoulder and a big giant head, and then there's like this tiny little right shoulder. I don't trust those so much. So I might even consider this still to be the same head. You could get it. You could get another shoulder after this, but in any case, if you see price under this 380 or 372, I consider that a breakdown of the head and shoulders pattern. The target for that is down here, down by like 300 to 266. There's a big volume of support. There's a volume of support range down here, so it might stick around at 340 for a little while. But the target for the head and shoulders is down here at 300 to about 267. Palantir, another giant head and shoulders, already did the breakdown, already tried to recover, failed here, dropped down, is trying to bounce back, most likely going to get rejected. Most likely going to get rejected at 148. We'll see what happens. Sometimes they can go above the neckline area, but even so, most likely gonna curve back over and come down. The target is down here, 105 to 90. If this gets rejected right here, your target's down here, 105 to about 105 to 90. Broadcom, you can see we had the peak, and then it's just following this parabola curve down. It's not good. I don't know where you want to consider the breakdown. Maybe the breakdown was here, right? 325. Or the breakdown was here when it flipped bearish. But below 288, it's just going to it would just get worse. Gold, everybody's favorite. This is the parabola that's been on. Then it was kind of switched over to this higher, more aggressive parabola. It was going to get to the point where it was going to have to pass through this hurdle of resistance, the previous all-time high, which you could see from the kind of like the extreme candle wick. Couldn't get through it. Got rejected, broke under the parabola, so it's dropped. So it's dropped to 5,000. Now it's going to make a decision. Is it going to stick on 5,000? If it sticks on 5,000, then it'll be fine. If the world is crazy, it'll probably help it stay on 5,000. But it could just as easily break under 5,000, and then you get some. You could get some opportunities to reaccumulate in this zone, this like mid 4,000s. We might even get lucky to break under this parabola, the bigger, longer-term parabola, and come into a reaccumulation zone at 4,400, 4,000. In a way, silver, I mean, I consider silver to be still kind of a meme metal, and just feeding off of what gold was doing. I find it interesting though that silver broke down before gold a little bit. So I think there's a good chance. I mean, if gold goes under 5,000, then figure these lower levels of silver come into play. If gold stays above 5,000, these lower levels probably don't come into play. I was curious to see if this was going to form into a double top. It didn't. It broke out with the Iran chaos. So we'll see what happens. I think there's a lot of oil in the world, to be honest with you. If the Iran stuff gets resolved, I think it would take a lot of pressure off of oil, to be honest with you. So there's a possibility that it goes up as high as here. This would be totally realistic in my mind. It'd also be totally realistic for people to this could be just the hot narrative right now, and then it moves on. And you're telling me the entire world is in love with oil? I mean, like the ball of money. Not oil's obviously important, but you're telling me the ball of money. The ball of money is now suddenly obsessed with oil? It just seems unlikely. So this time of this being the hot interest item could fade, and things could return back to a baseline, a normal baseline of like 125, 115. We'll see. Let's do this. Bitcoin slowly, it's in this channel, but it's slowly getting slightly lower and lower. That's actually better than if it was slowly working. See here, we're working our way up in a channel, which is actually not the best. This actually indicates that you might break down. Whereas in my opinion, if it's in a channel but slowly going down, there's a better chance that it pops to the upside. By the way, these are, like, in my opinion, these prices are DCA suitable for BTC. We're already low. We're already low enough that we're in like a DCA zone where you could DCA if you wanted to. We're kind of ahead of schedule also. I didn't think this stuff was going to come into play until later, but we're ahead of schedule. My optimistic interpretation is that this line right here holds for this zone. Now, what happens after that? What happens in May? Do we drop in lower and enter like a super discount zone of below 50, below 52,000? Maybe. But there is a lot to say that it's low enough. If you consider this the peak of interest, the peak of alts, the peak of BTC value compared to gold, that shifts all this over here, and this suddenly winds up right in here, and we wind up being right on schedule. But that only works if you consider this the true peak. And I know people would say, well, but this was the peak. It's higher. Okay, you could say that, but last cycle, the April top, which was slightly smaller, was the peak. That was the peak of euphoria, the peak of interest. And yes, there was a peak later, but the true power peak was the peak in April. So sometimes your peak of interest, your peak of importance can be the price that is not actually the highest price. This is just my opinion. This is Solana. This isn't really a prediction, but I would say it's not a prediction, but it's just, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if you were nabbing it at these prices. That, of course, requires Bitcoin to break down. So if Bitcoin has a positive, here, we'll turn on the volume. If Bitcoin has a positive blast, I could see Solana coming up to like 123 at like a max, hitting the underside of this volume area. And then later, if we have another dip, it drops in and you get, super buy opportunities down in here, $38 to $68. All right, that's going to wrap it up. I could show you SPX 6900, but remember that one doesn't have a chart. So you just got to DCA into that when you think it's appropriate. All right, talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.